Hi, it's Saturday, November 8th, and we're tracking Typhoon Fung-Wong, Philippine name Uwan now in the Philippine Sea this morning, and we're seeing the system get better organized in its convective structure today, and we'll likely see in response to that a more significant phase of intensification take place throughout the day today and into Sunday morning local time. And we can really see this if we look at the central part of the storm as the sun rises over this Philippine Sea this morning. And comparatively to the past few days, we see now much more centralized bursts of convection occurring as compared to all the banding features that were more removed from the center of the storm over the past few days. And so the effect of this at the surface beneath the clouds is that we're seeing an eye wall structure now being closed off this morning with this microwave pass that we got not too long ago, showing that the deep convective bursts that we're seeing are working to close off a broad inner core structure in the center of the storm. Now, broad is a key term there, as we talked about this yesterday, how the overall size of the core once closed off will determine exactly how strong the system gets. And now that we're seeing a broad inner core close off, this lowers the probability of, say, a category 5 like we saw on some more high-end model runs a few days ago. However, it's important to note that we're probably still going to see the system get very strong, and it could still easily get to super typhoon strength as we get close to the Philippines in time. And this is the current forecast from a lot of the model guidance that we have this morning. I'll show you the HASS model, which is a high resolution hurricane model, and I've shown you this for the past several days. And what you'll see is that this morning it's seeing this eye wall starting to be built and close off. And once that occurs, we start to see a more significant drop in the pressure rate. And pay attention to the pressure number up here, and you'll see that so far we really have not decreased at a very rapid pace. We've been gradually going down to around 970 millibars this morning, and over the next few hours it shows it dropping about 10 millibars. But especially as we go into this afternoon and into Sunday morning, we'll see this really tank down in values. We see it go from 960 to 950 to 940 down to bottoming out around 920 millibars by Sunday afternoon. This would be local time. And this has been a very significant intensification rate, likely rapid intensification. And now the winds have come up very significantly in response to those pressure falls. And this is now on the forecast a super typhoon as it gets very close to the Philippines coastline by this point in the forecast period. And again, this is a fairly well agreed upon idea by much of the model guidance we have this morning. The HAFS model, the HWRF model, which is another hurricane model, the GFS global model, and even AI models like Google DeepMind, which has been very consistent on showing a super typhoon out of the system, especially in this part of the forecast. And so for that reason, the expectation is still that we have a very strong typhoon nearing the Philippines by Sunday, with landfall expected in Luzon on Sunday night or early on Monday. Though one thing I should make clear here is that just because landfall is expected in that time frame does not mean the impacts are going to start at that exact same time. One thing that we've talked about a lot for the past few days is just how large the system is. And one effect of that is that today really is your last chance to prepare in the Philippines. Even though we're not expecting landfall until Sunday night, starting Sunday morning or even this evening, we will likely see conditions deteriorate across the Philippines. As you can see, these outer bands are getting close to wrapping in already into the central Philippines. And we've already seen signal 2 warnings issued for some of these islands in the central Philippines. And we'll likely see a further expansion of that in time as these outer bands get closer and closer to rotating in. And so that means that today is your day to finish preparations ahead of the storm. As by Sunday afternoon, once those outer bands rotate in, they'll likely have tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall. And that will make conditions too dangerous to prepare ahead of the storm by that point. And you can see this illustrated really well by the HAFS model by this point. Again, same frame that I just showed you, and you'll see that we have these strong tropical storm force winds impacting a large region now of the Philippines, even well before the center makes landfall. And one thing we'll have to watch very closely in the short term is short-term wobbles in the exact center track. As you can see right now on this forecast, we're getting away from the typhoon force wind field here in the central Philippines. But a little deviation to the south could mean that this typhoon force wind field gets onshore. And that could lead to more significant wind impacts, but also surge impacts wherever the wind is blowing onshore as it progresses towards the west, staying north of those islands. And that's going to be a very important detail to watch in short term for the next few hours. Now, going towards landfall, One good news is that we're expecting wind shear to increase as we head towards landfall. And we talked about this yesterday, how models have been showing stronger shear in this part of the forecast than they have in the past few days. And that's because we have a stronger area of high pressure that's been modeled near and east of Taiwan in the upper parts of the troposphere. And so the net effect of this is that we have stronger easterly flow in the mid to upper parts of the troposphere over the Philippine Sea and the South China Sea. And we can see the effects of this on the storm if you take a look at the sounding from the GFS. And this is showing you the wind direction and speed with height. And you'll see that we have very strong winds in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere. And the net effect of this is a pretty significant moderate shear with deep layer values here being over 20 knots. And this will likely put some pressure on the storm and likely cause it to weaken. Now, exactly how much it weakens, unfortunately, not likely too much. One downside of having a larger storm like this is it can tend to be more resilient to the impacts of vertical shear like this, or speed shear would be more so in this case. And so, even though we see that shear increase to those significant values, even on models like the HASP, we don't really see it weaken all too much from peak intensity. You can see it peaks out again around 920 millibars, and by landfall, the pressure rises around 10 millibars, maybe a little bit more before the actual landfall. But the winds don't come down too much. This is still very close to being a super typhoon by landfall in the Philippines. So unfortunately, this shear is not going to really do much, it seems like, and we're likely going to see the system still come in as a very strong typhoon in the northern Philippines. And that's the current expectation from the Picasa forecast this morning. You could see becoming a super typhoon late tonight into Sunday morning and remaining near that intensity as it makes landfall in Luzon, likely again late Sunday night or early on Monday. And with that, it will bring very significant storm surge on the northern side of where the system makes landfall. You can see that the eye wall, which is typically pretty compact in these storms, takes up a pretty large region along the coast. And this white to pink area is the eye wall. So that's where these strong, potentially super typhoon force winds are. And you can see just how large of an area that may be impacting. And this may not be the full eye wall. In fact, it likely isn't. There's part of it that's onshore and being impacted by friction. So by this point, we're seeing a very large area get in on the very strong typhoon force winds by landfall. And we'll likely see a large expanse of signal 4, maybe even signal 5 warnings across Luzon as the system comes into landfall here. Now, one thing as well is that we're expecting very heavy rainfall with this system, especially as the inner core comes in. If we look at the simulated radar imagery out of this, you can see very heavy rainfall starts to go right up against the mountains here in Luzon, and that will likely lead to extreme rainfall rates, which could lead to flash flooding across much of this region. It's not just going to be one side of the mountain compared to the other. It's going to be across really the entire part of Luzon in this forecast. And so we're expecting a lot of heavy rainfall here, and you can see this in the forecast from the HASP model. This is only out 4 days, and you'll see that as the core of the system pushes through, the reds there is 150 millimeters or more. And once you get into these golden colors, that's 300, 400, maybe even 500 millimeters of rainfall in some localized spots. And you'll see how that is very widespread across Luzon by that point. And after the system moves back over water, which it's forecast to do, that doesn't mean the rainfall is done. This is another reflectivity or simulated radar by the time it's sitting over the South China Sea. This is the Philippines, this is Taiwan up here, and you'll see these outer bands continue rotating in as it makes this turn towards the north. And so that will add on to the rainfall that we see, especially across this western part of the coast. So a significant flooding threat is looking to be taking shape here as the system comes in. And note how it's not just across the Philippines. Look at Taiwan as well. This is by this point in the forecast, the system has not even made landfall in Taiwan yet. But because that we have these outer bands rotating into the high terrain, we're seeing very heavy rainfall on the windward side of the island. The leeward, not so much, but that will change once the system passes off to the north and the winds shift more out of the west. And that's the current forecast from Pagasa. You can see moving west-northwest, making landfall in the Philippines, and then making this turn and slowing down as it does so, which could also make those outer bands persist for longer than you would normally expect after a storm comes through. But that general bend towards the north is expected because we have this upper ridge up here, the western part is weakening, so it's going to be by landfall in the Philippines on the western side of this ridge, which will turn it to the north. And that's why we're expecting that turn to occur into Taiwan. Now, there is a bit of uncertainty there in that part of the forecast, as it is getting towards the latter half of the forecast period. So naturally, there is going to be some more uncertainty in the exact track details. So we could see the system go west of Taiwan into China. So we could see more direct impacts in that way in terms of rainfall and storms right along that coast. Or we could see it even bend towards the northeast further, and that could get the storm very close to the islands north of Luzon and southern Japanese islands as it tracks towards the north. Though some good news with that part of the forecast is that it will be moving over cooler waters, and wind shear will likely be persisting across this region. So it will likely be weakening, and we're not expecting any significant intensification or any at all after it comes offshore of the Philippines. And so as we go into this part of the forecast, the main risk will likely be of rainfall, as you can see in this forecast. And this only goes up to 4 days. So for areas like the coast of China, southern Japan, that will likely be a significant rainfall threat there as well, even though it's not shown in this forecast. And that, again, more significant rainfall coming into likely this western part of Taiwan as it passes to the north and the winds change out of the west. So a long duration and significant impact likely coming here from multiple countries across this part of the world. The last thing I'll show you is the signal warnings that we have in place for the Philippines as of their 5 a.m. advisory from Pagasa. And you can see, again, the signal 2 warnings already in place for the easternmost part of the central coast in the Philippines. But you can see just how broad the influence of the system is going to be. All the northern Philippines is under a signal 1 warning here. And this will likely be extended into signal 2 and signal 3 warnings as you get closer and closer to the landfall spots. So again, emphasizing a broad region going to feel the effects of the storm as it comes through. And of course, I'll have more videos on this as it progresses towards the west-northwest. But as for now, that's all that I've got in this video. So thanks for watching.